Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Welcome to Puppetize Digital, where today we're going to be speaking with some of our federal partners and customers around IT modernization in the US government. Today I have three specialists in this area, and we'll start by going through a round of introductions. First, let's start with you, Jeffrey, if you could give us a few minutes about yourself.
Sure. I'm a HPC Linux systems engineer here at Oak Ridge National Lab. I'm part of the HPC infrastructure and networking group, and I support the infrastructure for the compute and data environmental sciences.
Excellent, thank you. Shawn, could you give us an introduction?
Yeah, sure. Hi there. My name is Shawn Hall, and I am the Director of Next Generation Data Center Engineering at Kinney Group. I lead a team of engineers that deliver professional services and product-based solutions to federal and DoD customers. We work primarily on projects in the federal space and mostly in the DoD. I've been a Puppet user as an engineer. I've been a Puppet user for well over 5 years, and we've utilized Puppet significantly as one of our primary automation platforms for many of the solutions we've built and delivered to our customers.
Excellent, thank you. And Trevor, if you could give us an introduction.
Absolutely. I'm one of the co-founders of Onyx Point Incorporated. We have a booth over in the expo hall. We've actually been automating system security and compliance with Puppet and related technologies for over a decade with a strong focus on the federal space. We started in the federal space and have kind of branched out into commercial industry from there recently. We've been working on compliance automation both in terms of consulting and the System Integrity Management Platform, or SIMP, which you can find on the Puppet Forge. And our recent focus has been on getting the latest STIGs and CIS requirements both in place, vetted, and certified for release to our customers.
Thank you so much. So today's going to be a Q&A conversation about the space that we're talking about today. We also have Q&A available in the chat section that if you do have a question, we can try to have that answered. Do keep in mind that our participants here work in secured spaces, so some of the information may need to be scaled back a bit. First, I'm going to start with you, Jeffrey. Jeffrey, you spoke at a Puppet camp earlier in the year about Bolt. Can you share, with everyone here how you're using Bolt today?
Sure, absolutely. I can give 3 examples of how I'm currently using Bolt within the environment that I support. First, multi-service application patching has always been challenging. By using Bolt, I've been able to choreograph large-scale upgrades of, say, for instance, the Puppet server infrastructure that I use to manage CADEs. I'm looking to do the same with other application stacks, such as Elastic. Second, I had a security application installed on one of our systems that was starting to badly misbehave on multiple systems by filling up our op file system. Working with the group that actually managed that application, we identified what changes needed to occur and then enacted those changes using Bolt in order to be able to reconfigure the systems as needed and the application as needed. And it's performing swimmingly now as a good citizen on those systems. The third example that I've been doing recently has been utilizing Bolt plans for management of mirrors of open source software repositories. By combining Bolt and GitLab runners and Puppet, we are moving towards a more automated software consumption model.
Excellent. Now, Trevor, we had a conversation recently about a workflow where folks spin up resources, they run Bolt to get it in a specific state, and then they move on in their process or pipeline. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so the initial impetus of the SIMP project was to actually keep systems in compliance over time with Puppet. But we've gotten more requests where people want to just point at a system in the cloud, make it compliant one time and move on. And we found that Bolt was great for using our existing Puppet code in SIMP to allow us to basically do this one-time apply to lock things down to STIGs or CIS on the fly moving forward. So they can really use the exact same code base for enforcement over time and enforcement one time. And it's been a really good benefit.
Awesome. Shawn, your group at Kinney Group, you work in some big data centers and you work on tactical projects. So as a director of this group, for next gen data center engineering, what are the big trends that you're seeing in the field right now?
Yeah, so security and compliance, they have been and continue to be probably the biggest use case that we see for automation technologies. Not only that, state management and continuous enforcement of state is a very big concern for a lot of our customers. Not only do they need to pass the audits, they need to prove to the auditors that their systems will maintain the secure baseline when it's operational. And this is especially important for disconnected systems or systems running on closed networks. In a lot of cases, we still see system management being done in very manual ways in a lot of cases. And when we do find automation being used to manage and secure systems, it's typically done in fairly incomplete or disjointed ways that still end up putting a lot of manual work back on the administrators and the maintainers. And so this burden takes these folks away from the delivering on the critical tasks that move their organizations forward. So, having that ability to automate, having that ability to visualize and to kind of get, the state of their system and see the state of their system is really important. And we have a specific subset of customers here that are dealing with ways to kind of ease deployment to these systems as well. So when we have to deploy systems to close or disconnected networks, typically these systems are disparate. It means they're physically deployed across the globe and they're not connected to each other. So we leverage automation technologies quite a bit to configure and deploy patch systems to meet mission tempo because they can achieve an automated set of repeatable processes that do not rely strictly on human intervention.
That's excellent. Anyone have any comments about that on the panel? Is that something that you also see with the clientele that you work with and the solutions that you put together?
Hey, I was going to say, yeah, we definitely do. A lot of people are still, as Shawn was saying, they're kind of still in that manual phase trying to move forward. And, that's really what we've really seen a big uptick in trying to bring in more automated solutions. And again, kind of having these pre-populated modules in the Puppet space has been really helpful.
Great. So, Trevor, go ahead.
I was just going to say something else that we're really seeing a big movement on is, DevOps or DevSecOps practices adoptions. A lot of our federal agencies, they have big monolithic processes that aren't necessarily conducive to modern DevOps practices, but we are seeing more and more movements where these agencies are trying to adopt elements of DevOps wherever they can. So, take an example of a project that we've been working on, which is automating deployments to some of these disconnected systems. It's important that there is a consistent and repeatable process for these automated deployments to happen, because you're likely going to repeat that process multiple times in multiple places. And there's a good chance those environments aren't going to be necessarily in sync with each other. So in a lot of cases, in a lot of cases in the same situation, we have to carry the software payloads in physically from one location to another. So by leveraging tools like Puppet, we can ensure that we have a consistent process in place that we can test and validate prior to releasing it to the field.
And do you find that part of the value there is that moving away from a run book with humans typing commands, with the values inherent in the solution that you bring to the field?
Yeah, absolutely. We've had a couple of pretty significant projects like that where we've actually taken run books and automated them. Leveraging Puppet as sort of the underlying technology stack that does the majority of the work. One of the big challenges we find in this space too is those run books get out of date pretty quickly, right? So you're either going to have a run book that's no longer valid after, or it was incorrect in the first place, which unfortunately we do see that quite a bit as well. So, by leveraging automation, configuration as code, this certainly does kind of help move the needle and take a lot of that burden away from the humans that are having to do the work.
Excellent. So this question's to Trevor. In our first ever Fed Public Camp that we had in September, you talked about the growth of DevSecOps. How are your customers adopting DevSecOps?
Yeah, first off, the first camp was really great, and I'm hoping you guys have more in the future. We're really, well, as Shawn was saying, we are also seeing a huge uptick in the adoption of DevSecOps across the federal space. In our experience, we really saw this starting when the risk management framework was first introduced. It was talking about continuous monitoring, et cetera, and continuous monitoring really segued directly into continuous remediation. From our point of view, once that happened, we started seeing more federal agencies and federal contractors get interested in the SIMP platform, since that's literally what it was designed to do. When it was released as open source 5 years ago by the government, it was, the goal was to actually reduce the rework of this type of platform across the federal space. And the great thing about putting it out into the public community was that we could really help achieve those goals. And we've gotten input from different agencies, from people, from international participants, and from teams like Vox Populi and Hercules team. So it's been really great working with everyone. Kind of moving forward, we're seeing more evidence of DevSecOps moving into the federal base. First off, with the DoD Enterprise DevSecOps Initiative, which was published relatively recently. And then even the cybersecurity maturity model being applied to contractors. If you actually read through everything, it really does lend itself greatly toward adopting DevSecOps approaches. So we're really, it's not just the federal agencies, they're actually pushing things down to the contractor level across the board as well.
Excellent. And Jeff, do you have you mentioned that you use Bolt in a few use cases. Do you have a repeatable process with Bolt for remediation that you see or that you're using today?
Sure. For monitoring, I use Bolt as well as Puppet in order to be able to push out the tools, in order to be able to, we're primarily I've been working with Prometheus lately in order to be able to pull in metrics and then alert off of that. So Bolt has been great for systems that don't have Puppet yet installed or are in different areas as well, or Disco systems. This last summer, there was the boot hole problem that came about that we had to address pretty quickly. And since there was the script that was available in order to be able to assess which systems were vulnerable or not, we were able to use Bolt very quickly to push that out and run that app remotely in order to be able to determine which systems we actually had to patch out of band. Similar to what we just did here last week, I think, where the FA policy D issue came up with REL 8.3. So we were able to identify which systems were vulnerable to that and not update them, DOSing ourselves. So there's quite a few different ways that we use it.
Great. And do you use that in a team fashion? Like, is it in a shared space that more than one individual can use Bolt in this? Do you have a run book per se for running Bolt for these cases?
So the paradigm that we use is using not Rundeck or something like what was discussed in the keynotes. We have Bastion hosts that we use in order to be able to actually reach out and touch the systems that we're in charge of, and we have a shared code repository that we use.
Excellent. Awesome. So that lends itself a bit to distributed systems. And Trevor, as systems become more distributed, how can federal agencies best evolve their practices to ensure that they're keeping up with compliance?
Well, our experience is that environments preparing for heavy distribution should really start small and build outwards. We end up seeing a lot of clients that we work with kind of trying to jump directly into the cloud or directly into large distributed systems without really tackling the workflow problems at a small scale. And a couple of these instances, we've actually brought tools like GitLab and GitLab CI to bear to help them really understand the ticketing workflow, the CI workflow, and how to basically trigger environment updates and test environment updates using RSpec Puppet, using Litmus, using Beaker, to make sure that their applications actually work prior to deployment, even at a small scale. So once we kind of solidify that, getting them to scale out further to different cloud environments or container environments becomes relatively straightforward. They can use the exact same code, the exact same materials. They can deploy to any number of clouds or bare metal and manage it all with the Puppet infrastructure, very cleanly and very consistently, even, again, as Jeffrey was saying, for one-offs using Bolt. If you want to see examples of how we do this, we have a great number of modules through the Ascent project on the Forge, and those are actually hooked into GitLab CI directly, so you can actually see the entire workflow that we suggest to our customers kind of in use in the open source arena.
Excellent. I know that the SIMP modules have been downloaded many, many times, and security and compliance is, really key to supporting the people that are in the field and all the agencies in the government that you deal with. So, Jeffrey, both Shawn and Trevor now have mentioned security and compliance as it is always a hot topic. How are you implementing security controls, and what benefits do you see from continuous compliance?
Sure. Continuous compliance, it's one of those new things that people are talking a lot about it. Those techniques allow me in order to be able to more easily meet requirements for two different security groups here. And by codifying and testing the changes using Puppet in order to be able to meet these CIS benchmarks, each group can validate that what I push out and what we push out to other systems are actually valid configurations for whatever tool of choice they're using. Hopefully they agree when they actually scan
it. That would be nice, wouldn't it? Shawn, Trevor, continuous compliance in disconnected systems. Do you have any thoughts around that, where you have walled off networks for these deployments?
Honestly, that was kind of if you look at the way SIMP was built, we actually have an ISO deployment by default. So we kind of came from the idea, like I was mentioning, start small and build out. So from our point of view, bring everything you need, test everything you need, test everything as an isolated system, and you can do it online, offline. It's absolutely identical. So that's one of the reasons we've stuck with Puppet for over a decade, because it's been a great tool for making that happen. About 6 months ago, I actually even got Beaker to the point where I can do nested virtualization testing to actually take a system offline to allow me to simulate completely offline environments in Beaker during the acceptance testing for our modules. It's been really nice.
Yeah, so disconnected and isolated systems, they're especially challenging, right? Because they're not like your traditional data center. But in a lot of cases are really beholden to the same compliance standards. So one of the challenges we see in this world is, getting our compliance changes out to these environments. And so where Puppet can help us with that is, we deploy our compliance code just like we would deploy our software patches, right? They go out with our software patches, in fact. Which kind of leads to sort of another, trend that we see a lot these days is, compliance remediation content and development of that content. Obviously, Trevor, those guys have done a pretty extensive job of developing a library of content to help in that area. And we see that, our customers don't want to write it themselves, but they simply don't have time. And it's or either that or they don't have the skill set to do it. But then, as soon as you write it, it changes, right? So somebody needs to stay on top of it, and it's as the compliance frameworks change. So we really, we really need to have that trusted compliance content, remediation content out there that we can use to achieve continuous compliance.
And I actually wanted to mention, we took a kind of slightly different approach for our Red Hat systems with the Cent project. We actually deliver all of our Puppet modules as RPMs. So all of our modules are wrapped up as RPMs. They're signed. Whenever they figure out what they're doing with SWID tags, we'll end up actually adding SWID tags to the RPM so that they actually all mesh into the Red Hat framework itself cleanly. It doesn't mean you have to use the RPMs. You can use Puppet module install. You can use whatever you like, but it gives us a completely verifiable reference framework moving forward. And then we actually extract those RPMs, create local Git repos, and use R10K locally to distribute the materials into the system to kind of bootstrap your entire environment. Because again, one of our core goals is to be able to bootstrap an entire Puppetized compliant environment starting from absolute scratch.
Wow, that's impressive. Thank you for that. Shawn, we recently spoke about Fed agencies considering adopting containers and cloud native architectures. You know, what are some of the things that these organizations should consider, and how can Puppet help on that journey?
Yeah, so, you know, a lot of, especially DoD agencies and things like that, they're dealing with legacy applications that have been around. In some cases have been written a long time ago, right? And I think we see a lot of cases where there's a push to move to containers without really considering what the journey is going to be to get there, and you know, considering more of a lift and shift approach, if you will, which does come with some risks, right? Especially with if you're dealing with like a legacy application. You know, some of those risks are like you're not leveraging the benefits of containers. You know, potentially the application rewrite may not be easy or even possible. It's not uncommon in some of the customers, the spaces that we deal with, where, you know, the source code is essentially just gone. It was developed by contractors years ago, and they don't have the source code anymore. You know, and then obviously, you know, another risk is, in worst case risk, is it's a failure to convert and achieve the modernization that you're trying to achieve by making the move to containers. But I think, you know, one of the biggest things is, you know, forgetting about the brownfield, right? Forgetting about the operational systems. You know, using automation to free your teams up. I still believe it's really worth the investment. The journey to get to cloud native or containers, it's not going to be easy for a lot of people. And it's even harder when your teams are dealing with the day-to-day operational things and still doing a lot of manual processes. So, you know, we still see a ton of value in doing automation and implementing better automation in your you know, legacy applications. I actually just recently had a conversation with one of my customers. You know, they're trying to figure out how to move their workloads in the cloud, and he's really frustrated with the progress because he's struggling with ways to free up his team from some of the day-to-day system admin work that they have to do to meet the needs of their business, and they just don't have the time to deal with the new projects that are so critical to the advancement of their organization. So, you know, what we're doing is we're working with them to improve their Puppet implementation by, you know, first thing is moving them from Puppet open source to Puppet enterprise, and then helping them to shore up their Puppet code, make it more reliable, make it kind of in alignment with best practices, and help to get their team out of some of the day-to-day. What we discovered in that project too is kind of an interesting output was that, you know, once we moved to Puppet Enterprise, and you've got the console and you've got that visibility, you know, this customer has their own customers that they service. These are like the application owners. And, you know, we were able to, with Puppet Enterprise, give their application owners visibility into what the system administration team was doing to the servers that their applications run on, because they don't give them access to the root level of the systems and things like that, because they're responsible for security of the systems. So that visibility has been key, and was kind of like a light bulb coming on for them that, you know, now they've given them a window into being able to see, you know, what the system admin team is doing with their servers and what things are being changed or what things are being remediated, what things are being managed, and they still don't have to relinquish the control at the system level that they need to keep the separation of duties in place. So that was a really, really big win for this customer, and we continue to kind of help move them forward and drive them forward. So we still see a lot of value with Puppet and Puppet Enterprise in organizations, even for the legacy applications.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Anyone else have thoughts on how Puppet can help on this journey?
Well, we've actually been tinkering with containerization of the SIM platform recently, and what we actually found was that both Bolt and Puppet are great tools for kind of creating your container platform from scratch. As we started playing with the new tools in Podman, Builder, things, and that kind of ecosystem, we discovered that we can actually build the entire initial container set from scratch on network isolated systems. So we don't have to import any containers. We don't have to do anything like that. We can literally build a container from scratch, harden them using the exact same Puppet code that we have with SIMP, right? We have the code, it hardens things. So we can kind of stack up those layers so that you get trusted containers out of the box because you're actually using the vendor packages, the vendor environment, and theoretically we can actually package these containers as RPMs, which sounds weird, but I think it'll work. That's all experimental right now. But basically you can have this completely redistributable, fully signed environment without a need for additional infrastructure. So you don't actually need a container registry. You don't need anything like that. It's just containers. We actually recently, or earlier this year, published a white paper that you can get on our website that actually talks about aligning containers, just containers, not container infrastructures. That's covered in this 800-190, I think. But just containers with the this 863 requirements. So basically, going to the core federal level and federal requirement level and actually mapping those into just containers. And it's been very interesting, actually.
That's pretty exciting stuff there. So we only have a few minutes left here. I just wanted to understand, what are you looking forward to for your biggest opportunities? I mean, Shawn?
Yeah, so I'm pretty excited to see Puppet's evolution into an enterprise platform and bringing all the tools together in one place. I think it's going to resonate with customers and help to drive Puppet adoption deeper into a lot of our customers' organizations. And I think it's going to bring awareness to Puppet users for more use cases that Puppet can address that they haven't even really thought of. It'll provide more capabilities to current Puppet users and also other users in the organization. Another kind of a small thing, but I think something that's kind of impactful is like the value calculator that just came out in one of the more recent releases of Puppet Enterprise. For us at Kinney Group, demonstrating ROI is very important to us as a company. We spend a lot of time ensuring that our customers understand the ROI for the money that they're spending with us, and leveraging a tool like the value calculator will be pretty invaluable for us to help tell that story even more accurately.
And for folks that are listening that weren't able to make it to the keynote, today we announced how we're bringing a lot of these use cases together in more of a platform architecture so that you can have, for instance, in Jeffrey's case, you may leverage Bolt quite often, a project panel just for Bolt users, and then you'll have a continuous compliance type of persona that we can satisfy with traditional Puppet. And then we can also add on things like impact analysis so that you have visibility as a use case of someone who may press the button to deploy the code. So for the folks that are listening, you should check out the keynote if you haven't already today. I want to jump to Jeffrey, about your thoughts about what you're excited about in the future for opportunities.
Yeah, along those lines, APIs. I mean, it's an API-driven area, and the more we can drive with that, with infrastructure as code, the better off we are. And tools like Razor and Bolt and Terraform and Puppet, being able to meld those together in order to be able to deploy those resources as well as maintain the configurations, that's a good place to be. And where does it lead? I guess we'll find out.
That's true. That's true. Trevor, your final thoughts here?
Well, honestly, I'm looking forward to the growth in DevSecOps automation. I'm looking forward to more people getting involved. I'm looking forward to the community growing. And of course, a large portion of our code base is open source. So I'm looking forward to working with more people on kind of meshing different compliance standards into these code bases and kind of getting the measurability really to a much larger scale than we have now.
Awesome. Let's hope that 2021 is a better year than 2020, for sure. I'd like to thank all of our panelists today. I was Stephen K. Potter, Solution Engineering Manager here at Puppet. I'm thankful for this opportunity to talk to these wise experts in their fields. I hope everyone found this conversation useful and enlightening and found value out of it. And thank you, everyone, for joining us today on the panel. Thank you so much.
Thank
Thanks
you
for having us.
Thanks.
Thank you.